Welcome to Cybernet Security. Today we'll be talking about IP addressing, public and private IP addressing. So what are IP addressing? IP addressing is just a way we identify our devices on the network. It's just is a kind of an identifier that devices use on our network to communicate with each other. So what I mean by devices here, I'm not just talking about your laptops and your computers. We have many other devices that are using IP addressing. Once a network device is connected to the internet, that device must surely have an IP address. Whether a smartwatch, are you using your smartwatch, are you using your IoT devices, your cameras, your CCTV cameras that have to connect to the internet for communication with other cameras, you are definitely using an IP address. So here now, IP address of our different types. We have the public, we have the private IP addresses. So what are the public IP addresses? Public IP addresses are definitely IP addresses that are being used on the public network. These are the IP addresses when you are communicating to a server on the internet. These are IP addresses that you use in the internet level. But when you are talking about the IP addresses that you use within your internal network, we are going to be talking about the private IP addresses. Private IP addresses are IP addresses that are being used within the network. So now let's go to these side annotations. IP addresses are made up of 32 bits. It's 8 bits each. 1 minute. Let me bring up my pens. IP addresses are being made up of 32 bits. So what I mean by that is 32 bits. Like I said, is made up of 4 octets as well. 32 bit. That's 4 octets that are being separated by a dot. So I have 8 bits here. Sorry for my writing. I have another 8 bits here. 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 So these bits are being separated by a dot. So when you add up these bits, that's when you have a 32 bits architecture. So how do I mean by that? These 8 bits are being made up of ones. These 8 bits are being made up of one and zeros. So let me bring up this page. So here now we can see the 8 bits we have here. So these 8 bits are being made up of ones and zeros. So as you can see here, um, we have 10.88.135.144/28. So when you look at this first portion here, this is the first octet, we have the second octet, we have the third octet, we have the fourth octet. So these octets you are seeing here is a result of the combination of these 8 bits that you are seeing here. It depends on which of the bits are on off. Understand? So let me give you guys a small drawing. So these 8 bits, how we do this is I'm talking about just this one portion here now. You start from 1 to count 1, 2, 4, just double of it. 4 plus 4 8, 8 plus 8 16, 16 plus 16 is 32, 32 plus 32 is 64, 64 plus 64 is 128. So when I divide this stuff into 7, I have 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 bits. So when I decide to on, I decide to on this 128 and on this one here and off others here 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0, and I want to know, like I said, I'm talking about this particular octet here. I'm trying to show you guys how we got this 10 here. So here now, if I should add 128 plus this one here, I'm looking at the ones that are on, the ones that have 1 on them. The ones that have zeros on them, that is, we are not going to look at them. So the ones that have 1 on them, that is how you calculate. So 128 plus 1, you have 129. So this first part that we are looking at should be 129 dots. That is how we got this 129 here, because this part is what we have on the 128 part and the one part is what we have on in this our situation. So now when you come back to this page now, we can see that we have the second and the fourth bits on. So when these two bits are on, when these two bits are on, you can see that let's go to back to our notepad. You can see the second bit is 2 and the fourth bit is 8. When you add 8 plus 2, that's when you have 10. That is why we can see 10 in this particular octet. 10.88.135.144 is okay. So that's how we arrived to this 10. So the same thing is applied to the rest of these octets here. So here now, let's talk a little bit about classes of IP addresses. IP addresses in for IP addresses we have um, 5 classes in IP addressing. So how do we check those classes? Those classes are what we use as network administrators to 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 know the range of IPs that we'll be using. So when you talk about class A, talk about class A IP address, we are talking about IP addresses that range from 0.0.0.0.0 to 126.255.255.255. So for class B IP address, we have class B IP addresses we have ranging from 1 to 8.0.0.0 to 191.255.255.255. So class C IP addresses we have 192.0.0.0, okay, to 223.255.255.255. And the class C IP addresses, we will not be talking about that. Class C IP addresses are IP addresses that are used basically for multicasting. It starts from 224 multicast purpose for multicast, and we have not class C, sorry, here is class D, and we have for class E, which are still being used for experiments. You understand? So the class A, B, C is what we normally see on the public network, or on what we usually use to configure our internal IP addressing. So the class D and class E is, you might not encounter them because they are not actually used for internal networking or the public internet. So within this class A IP addressing, we have what we call public and private, like I mentioned before. Public private IP addresses are in class A. Private IP addresses in class A is any IP address that has to that started as what I'm told you. This is the range of class A, 0 to 126. So for their private IP addresses range in class A, you only have 10.0.0.0 to 10.255.255.255. This is the IP address you have for class A. Any other IP address that exists within this first class A range is known as the public IP addresses. So in class B, we have for a private IP addresses in class B, we have 172.16.0 to 172.31.255.255. So in class C, IP addresses, every other IP address that you see that is not this 172.116.0.0 and to this range that is not that is in class B is known as a public IP address. So in class C, we have 192.168.0.0 to 192.168.255.255. Any other IP is in this range. This 192.223.255 is known as the public IP addresses. This is just what we have, the range we have for these private IP addresses. So why public and private IP addresses? Public IP addresses are registered IP addresses that are used for the internet working. So but private IP addresses are IP addresses that you will use within your internal network, which can still be reused. Private IP addresses doesn't, you can use the same private IP addresses on your different sites or your environment, the same private IP addresses for different sites on your environment, so it doesn't have to do it. But public IP addresses are unique. When you're using a public IP address, you might not be able to use it again. So public IP addresses are unique because they are used on the internet level. So so this is like from this our example here, from the example we have here, the 10.0.8.135. If I'm to ask you what IP address range this guy falls in, you probably agree with me that it falls into a class A IP addressing, and this is this is equally a private IP address. So because it fell within the range of 10.0.0.0.0 to 10.255.255.255. So this is how you check how you know a private and a public IP addressing. So here now, why do we have this here? This is side annotation. This side annotation is what classifies under one subnet mask. This subnet mask is what we use, like when I used my when I opened my command prompt to check my IP address in here, you guys can see subnet mask 255.255.255.0. This guy is what I use to classify, to know which portion of this, because this IP addresses that you're seeing here is divided into two portions: the network addressing portion and the host addressing portion. So what I mean by network addressing portion, tells me how many what's the total number of networks I can derive from an IP address range, or what's the total host I can have within an IP network. So that is what I simply mean there. So what I mean by that is, when I look at this my subnet mask here, I can either have a slash 8 slash 16 slash 24 slash 32 for a classful route subnet mask subnetting. But for classless subnetting, it can be variable, it can vary in different angles. So for the purpose of this video, we'll be talking about the classful subnetting. So when I have this guy to be 255.255.255.0, this is definitely slash 24. How do I get slash 24? How do I got slash 24 is when you look at this guy, and when I go back to this section here, this is one portion. This diagram, this explanation I did here is just for one portion, the one octet in my IP addressing space. So but when you add up these numbers here, what you will have is you will have 256 in total. When you add 128 to plus 64 plus 32, all right, let's do that together. Calculator. So let me say 128 plus 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1. I have, sorry, okay, yeah, 255. I have 255. 255. That is how we got, sorry, this 255. That is how we got this 255. So when every, that means all these bits are on for me to have 255. That means all these bits are on for me to have 255. So when the first octet is on, which is 8 bits is on, the second octet is another 8 bits, all of them is on, which is 16. The third octet is 8 bits again, which is 24. So you can see we have the first octet, which is all of them on here. The second octet, all of them are on here. The third octet, all of them are on here. When you count the total number of bits here, you see the total that is on is 24. So what it simply means there is this first three portion of the addressing of your IP, this first three portions of IP, like when you look at my IP address 192.168.100, I cannot change. I can't change if I'm being given this IP address to use to subnet in my environment, I can't change these first three option because using this subnet mask, these first three options are definitely my network address. So I only have the option to vary the last octet, which is dot 72. So that means if my own device is using dot 72, which is there is another device on my environment that can use dot 71 or dot 70 or dot 73. So I have the opportunity of varying this guy from 1 to 254. So in this environment, this networking structure, I have opportunity of using up to 254 253 possible hosts, have 253 possible hosts on my environment. Why 253? Why 253 is when we looked at when we were talked about how many hosts that we can have on environment. For example, this guy here now. For example, if I am to have this first the first three octets to be complete, to be all ones, and the last octet, which is I said is my host portion, I have 8 bits there to be 0. That's the last octet of my IP address with this IP address that I'm working with. And right now we are talking about this structure, this setting here. So I only have 2 raised to power 8. I already have 2 raised to power 8 to know the possible options that I have. 2 raised to power 8, which are the total number of available hosts I can available hosts I can have on this my environment. So this total number of available hosts I have in this my is 256. So when I remove one, which is the network address, and the last one, which is the host, the broadcast address, what I have is 254. So these are the total this is the total number of hosts I can have on this particular type of network. So the other part here is the default gateway. This is what IP address as that I assign to my router. This is the IP address of my router. This is the IP, the link, the route whereby every devices that is being connected to my network going outside the internet, going to the internet, the route they go through. So let's look at it. So from here now I have a couple of systems here in a small network. I have two laptops, a laptop and 2 desktop here. So these laptops and this laptop and this desktop are connected within a local network using a switch. So and this guy have this IP address which is 192.168.100.1, and this guy has 192.168.100.2. This one has 192.168.100.3. These IP addresses are, and this router, the LAN leg, has 192.168.100.4. These are all private IP addresses that can only be used within this local network. For this device here to communicate to be able to visit Google server, you understand, it has to go through what we know as the public IP, which is an IP address. How do you get a public IP? A public IP can only be gotten through an ISP, where you pay an ISP. The ISP will give you when you pay an ISP, ISP will give you a modem that you install on your environment. So that IP they give to you, which is a public IP address, which is unique. Like I said earlier, public IP addresses are unique. They cannot be used. Two persons cannot be using one same public IP addressing on the internet. So when this public IP address is being given to you, any device that is on your internet network that wants to connect to the internet will have to go through this public IP addressing. So, but how does this thing work here? There is what we know as a NAT mapping on my router. This is a service, network address translator. This service, what it does is when a device from this local network wants to connect to the internet, there is a mapping that is being done. It maps this IP address, the IP address of the device that wants to go to an outside server, that wants to visit an outside server. It maps the IP address to the public IP address. This is many to one NAT. Many to one NAT. It maps this private IP address to the public IP address through a port. And this device here can be able to access the Google server in the internet. So without this public IP address being here, there cannot be internet on this environment, but there will still be a connectivity within the devices on this network, but no internet. They won't be able to visit the internet from this network. So that is how private and public IP addresses work. And in my next video, I will be talking about the DNS and how DNS works, and how this Google server was being able to how these devices were able to locate this Google server where it's sitting, because this Google server is being installed, is sitting somewhere on the internet, which you don't know. So there is a service known as this DNS that does a domain name resolution. It's a kind of tells you where that server is sitting on the internet. So in my subsequent video, I will have to do a video that has to that will cover that. So I will quickly use this opportunity to thank people that have already subscribed to this channel. I so much appreciate your contributions to the success of this channel. And if you haven't subscribed, just don't feel to subscribe to this channel, because more resourceful contents will be coming your way. Thank you guys, and do have a lovely day.